Since I've been working on suicide, I've talked to people who made their first suicide attempt as young as age 3, and to psychiatrists who have suicidal patients who are small children. For me, it was like this constant background noise in my thoughts. I want to die, I want to die. And then as I got a bit older, I want to kill myself. I want to kill myself. And even though I wasn't constantly attempting it, I was thinking about it just all the time, all day, every day. It's kind of like if you remember when you were a teenager and all you could think about was sex. And maybe not just when you were a teenager, maybe that's still going on. Well, that's how it was for me and killing myself. And it went on that way for 55 years, and it only stopped, or started to change. It hasn't stopped, but started to change about 2 years ago, and I'll explain why I think that might be the case towards the end of my talk. The thing about me is, when I'm alone, I realize I'm with the guy who tried to kill me. Now, that's John Mulaney, not me. But it's true. And sometimes I'm really angry at that guy, that he failed, that he hasn't managed to kill me yet. But it's more complicated than that, because I'm also the guy who can save me. And I might even be the guy who can help some other people avoid dying by suicide. Maybe you're like me, and you have chronic suicidal ideation, or you know someone who does. Or maybe you or someone you love has made an attempt, or you've lost someone to suicide. You're not alone. The World Health Organization estimates that 10% of the world's population, almost 800 million people, suffer from suicidal ideation. That's an awful lot of people thinking about suicide, and many of us all day, every day. Suicide is almost always in the top 10 leading causes of death worldwide. And in the United States in 2021, it was the number 9 leading cause of death in people aged 10 to 64, and the number 2 cause of death in people aged 10 to 14 and 20 to 34. That statistic always makes me want to cry. A person in the United States dies by suicide every 11 minutes, which means, to put it in context, that at the beginning of my talk, somebody died by suicide, and before my talk is over, we'll lose another human being to suicide. But the WHO, well, let me say this. I think that almost everyone will consider suicide seriously at some point in their lives. Life is just so darn hard so much of the time. And as I tell my students, if we all had a little switch on our bellies that we could just flip and turn off our own personal existence, probably a lot of us wouldn't make it to age 18. But the World Health Organization also offers us some hope. When talking about suicide, they list the number 1 obstacle to making progress is stigma. Suicide and the prevention of suicide has not been adequately addressed, they say, because of lack of awareness of suicide as a major public health issue and the taboo in many societies to openly discuss it. And this is so frustrating to me. It's like we could cure diabetes or cure heart disease, or at least make major progress towards a cure just by having conversations. But it also shouldn't surprise us. As recently as 50 years ago in the United States, people were afraid to talk about their cancer diagnoses, and that stigma interfered with treatment. And our willingness to talk about depression, anxiety, addiction, and other behavioral health problems is only very, very recent. And there again, stigma and taboo have interfered both with the progress of scientific treatment and with people getting the help that they need. Furthermore, the best medicine we know of for suicide and for suicidal ideation is talk. The only serious philosophical problem, Albert Camus said, is suicide. And how do we solve philosophical problems? Ever since Socrates, the Buddha, and Jesus, we talk about them. And why does talking work? Because when you reach out and connect with another human being, you remember that your life matters. You remember that you're not alone, that everybody hurts, as REM memorably says, and that you're needed. Also, there's a thing called the Papageno effect, which shows that when we talk about suicide in a nuanced way, like we're trying to do right now, the rate of suicidal ideation and the likelihood of an attempted suicide in the population of everyone who's listening to or watching the talk goes down. Everybody in this room, just by being here, becomes less likely to commit suicide, to try. So we need to talk about suicide, but how? Well, John Draper, a friend of mine who founded one of the first suicide helplines in this country and was also one of the architects of the 988 mental health crisis line, told me that if you've attempted suicide, or you've even thought seriously about suicide, you have a superpower. Now you can talk with a kind of intimacy and understanding of suicide that can help every bit as much as any helpline. And you know, a lot of people, like me, don't want to call a helpline. So how do you talk to someone about suicide? How can you help? 5 crucial things to remember. First, you have to let people know that you're safe to talk to. Unless people know that you're a person they can trust with scary and really intimate things, that coworker, that friend, or that loved one isn't going to reach out to you. Next, you have to practice deep listening. Shallow listening is trying to talk away somebody's feelings or trying to solve their problems. Advise less and listen more. Deep listening means actually trying to feel the pain that that other person is feeling and acknowledging that that pain is real. The third thing to do is don't be afraid to ask them if they're feeling suicidal. I think most everyone knows this, but it's still a myth that persists that you might plant a seed. It's just a myth. Always ask. The fourth thing is share a story of your own struggles. That will help maybe more than anything else. And the fifth thing is keep them talking. And if you can, get them moving around, even get them walking, because you want to get them out of that space they're in, which is making the attempt possible and definitely making them feel more panicky and claustrophobic. Now, how can we help ourselves? When I'm feeling suicidal or when I'm about to make an attempt, I try to remember that I have to lessen the pain. Now, for me, what works really well is paying attention to my breath. I try to welcome my fear and panic, even to baby it, and then to let it go without fighting with it and without adding any thoughts to it. I try to lessen the pressure. And distraction works really well for that. So I'll go get a $1 ice cream cone at McDonald's. There have been times when I've gone through the drive-through line at McDonald's 3 times. Like, how much ice cream is this guy gonna eat? I have a playlist I found, and a lot of suicidal people I know find that listening to a song that cheers you up works really well. Going for a walk works really well. Bob Dylan lately never fails to cheer me up, and also very recently Post Malone helps me a lot. And I try to remember that I've been here before, which opens the blinders. Because when you're feeling suicidal, you become convinced that the only option is death. And there are always other options, and there are always better options. As Ken Baldwin said, who famously survived a leap from the Golden Gate Bridge, as soon as I jumped, I instantly realized that everything in my life that I thought was unfixable was totally fixable, except for having just jumped. You've tried suicide before, Clancy. It's always only made things worse. You know, waking up at Research Psychiatric is no fun. So why don't you try something a little bit different next time? The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche tells us that we have to attend as closely as possible to what he called our spiritual nutrition. What does that mean? It means really scrutinizing little details of your individual psychology. You need to think about the food you eat, when you drink coffee and how much, the kind of exercise you do, what social media you consume, the books you read, the television you watch, all these things, even things like the weather. Turns out, for me, if I bike too much, I get depressed. If I lose weight too quickly, even worse. Summer is harder for me than spring. If I don't get enough sleep, well, we all have our own list, and it's important that you have one, even if it's only mental. And absolutely, unequivocally, no guns in the house. Years ago, I had one. I got rid of that thing. And if you have to have a gun, you know, a good gun safe, because one thing a suicidally inclined person does not need is easy access to lethal means. And once you have that mental list, you'll have an action plan. Because the truth of the matter is, if you're a suicidally inclined person, you're not always going to want to save your own life. But you might remember that you promised yourself, or you promised your crazy suicide addict friend Clancy, that you'd send a text, or you'd go get an ice cream cone before you do something drastic and quite possibly irreversible. You deserve a good life. And part of a good life is a good death, not a lonely death in terror and despair. The truth is, we all have the power to save a life, our own or someone else's, just by being willing to talk and being willing to listen. Reach out, reach back, not to try to solve anybody's problems or talk away their feelings, but just to be willing to sit with their pain because you know that pain is real. And I want to tell you about something miraculous that happened to me that I never thought would happen. About 2 years ago, my suicidal ideation started to go away. Now, days, even weeks go by without me thinking of killing myself. I thought this was, for 55 years, I thought this was totally impossible. And I think the reason is incredibly simple. I started talking about suicide all the time. And, and I even helped some other people through their own suicidal crises. One support I have is a veteran who first reached out to me when he had his rifle in his mouth. And now we text each other every week or so with a 1 to a 10 about how we're doing. The first text I had from him was a 0, and a recent text I had from him was a 9. And if you're watching this and you're in crisis right now, if you're thinking of taking your own life, remember what we learned from the Roman philosopher Seneca. You can always do it tomorrow. Thank you. Wait just one day. And by doing that, you'll have saved your own life, and you'll have given yourself a day which you otherwise would never have had. It's like I was taking an Uber back from a suicide talk the other day, and I asked the Uber driver how he was doing. And he said to me, I woke up this morning, the rest is gravy. Thank you.